First, obviously, we'd like to thank the organizer of the workshop for giving us, so Arthur Leblois and I, the opportunity to present this work, which is about today the central role of the subthalamic nucleus in the propagation of Parkinsonism-related beta oscillation, so along the basal ganglia network in non-human primates, so both at the experimental and theoretical level. Before going into the details of the talk, I would like to say a few words about the basal ganglia network and also about its role in, let's say, behavior control. So, in fact, the basal ganglia are a set of interconnected subcortical structure, so which play a role in the integration of motor and non-motor information, and therefore contribute to a large diversity of brain function, so such as learning, action selection, decision making. And in fact, their dysfunction also lead to a common neurological disorder, so such as Parkinson's disease and Huntington disease, but also a psychiatric disorder such as obsessive compulsive disorder, as well as depression, which are characterize whatever the disease by motor, cognitive, and limbic also deficit. So today, in the classical model of the basal ganglia, the striatum is the only input structure of the network, and in fact, the striatum receives large glutamatergic projection from the cortex, but also from the thalamus, and then project, so directly and indirectly, so through the external segment of the globus pallidus and the subthalamic nucleus to the basal ganglia output structure, so the internal segment of the globus pallidus and the substantia nigra pars reticulata. And in addition, in the healthy condition, in the healthy state, the midbrain dopaminergic neuron, so massively innervate, not only, but massively innervate the striatum, and via their action on D1 and D2 receptor, are able to control the activity of these two pathways. And finally, in return, here, the output structure of the network project to the brainstem motor center, such as the superior colliculus or the pedunculopontine nucleus, but also project back to the cortical motor center, so via the thalamus. So this classical indirect, indirect model of the basal ganglia has been extremely helpful in the past for providing a narrative, but also prediction of Parkinson physiology and therapy. However, this model does not explain the dynamic features of the network, and especially the emergence of abnormal oscillation, so along the network observed in Parkinsonian patients. And also, it does not capture the full connectivity, the full complexity of the connectivity of the network. Indeed, there is evidence showing that the GPE also emit feedback, GABAergic projection to the striatum, and also feed-forward GABAergic projection to the output structure. And in addition, it has been shown also that the STN receive massive glutamatergic input from different areas of the cortex, and finally project back also to the GPE. So therefore, here, considering this new anatomical finding, this updated connectivity can be reorganized in order to create a three-layer neural network. So where the striatum and the STN are the two inputs of the network, and together innervate, so the central stage, so GPE, and the output stage of the network, so using glutamate for the STN and GABA for the striatum. However, and in fact, here it's the main question of this talk, what is the respective influence of the striatum and the STN, so of the two input structure of the network in the propagation of Parkinsonism-related beta oscillation, so observed in PD patients, so along the basal ganglia, is still something that we need to determine. So here in this talk, the talk will be divided into two main parts. So first, I will present some experimental result, and more particularly a result from neuronal recorded, so performed in non-human primates, so before and after induction of Parkinsonism. And then briefly, I will compare this result to the result obtained from the striatum of PD and dystonic patients, so undergoing a deep brain stimulation procedure. And then for the second part of the talk, Arthur will present some theoretical and computational aspects, which we believe corroborate, in fact, the experimental results. So first here, we recorded the neuronal activity in the different structure of the basal ganglia network, so in non-human primates, so before and after induction of Parkinsonism. So to induce Parkinsonism, here we treated our monkeys with a toxin, so-called MPTP, so in order to provoke, as you can see here with this TH, so immunoreaction in the striatum, immunoreactivity in the striatum, which provoke large striatal dopamine depletion, and which also induce severe and also stable Parkinsonian symptoms, so such as the bradykinesia, the rigidity, but also postural deficit and tremor. So using this experimental approach, I was therefore able then to investigate the emergence of Parkinsonism-related beta oscillations, so along the basal ganglia network, at the three different stages of the network. So input with the striatum and the STN, central with the GPE, and output with the SNR in what we call the multi-unit activity, which here is supposed to reflect the efferent or output activity of the structure. So remarkably, the power spectral analysis of the multi-unit activity reveal an increased power, so in the low beta band, so approximately between 8 and 15 Hertz in the STN, GPE, and SNR of the Parkinsonian monkeys. And similarly, the coherence analysis, a classical coherence analysis of the multi-unit pairs, so recorded simultaneously in each structure, also reveal a Parkinsonism-related 8-15 Hertz oscillatory synchrony, still in the STN, GPE, and SNR. However, and interestingly, the same analysis, so power spectral analysis and coherence in the striatum, does not reveal any oscillatory phenomena in the multi-unit activity of the striatal neuron, so in the PD condition compared to the healthy condition. And indeed, as illustrated, so here with this example of multi-unit activity, so recorded in the normal state and in the PD state, so before and after MPTP intoxication. So we found that unlike the STN neuron, GPE neuron, and SNR neuron, the striatal projection neuron did not express any abnormal oscillatory activity after induction of Parkinsonism. So then, when looking at a different neurophysiological signal, so than the multi-unit activity, so here, in this case, the local field potential, we found that the local field potential, so recording, so in all the structure of the network, so now including the striatum, exhibited an exaggerated 815 Hertz oscillatory activity, so in the PD condition compared to the normal and healthy condition. And because the local field potential are supposed to reflect the subthreshold and synaptic activity of the recorded neuronal population, we build and calculated what we called spike trigger averages of the local field potential, so here. And namely, what we did is that we align the local field potential with the spikes of the neuron recorded simultaneously from a different electrode in order to see if the spiking activity was synchronized with the oscillation in the local field potential recorded simultaneously. And in doing so, we found that local field potential, so in PD, exhibited larger fluctuations, so around the time of the spike of the STN neuron, GPE neuron, and SNR neuron, but not around the time of the spike of the striatal projection neuron. So indicating here, therefore, that the, let's say, the oscillating synaptic input, which are reflected by the abnormal LFP oscillation, entrained the spiking activity of the STN, GPE, and SNR neuron, but did not entrain the spiking activity of the striatal projection neuron.
3 minutes to 15.
Okay. So, and finally, to, let's say, close the loop, I also recently examined the spiking activity in the striatum of PD and dystonic patient. And so here we perform exactly the same kind of analysis than in non-human primates. So here you can see the power spectral analysis of the multi-unit activity. And in fact, we didn't find still any oscillatory spiking activity in the striatum in both diseases. In addition, when looking at the local field potential, so we found some peaks in the spectra of the LFP recorded, so in both disease. But as already shown in the non-human primates, so after treatment with MPTP, we did not observe any major fluctuation, oscillatory fluctuation around the time of the spike of the striatal neuron in both diseases. And so to conclude here, in fact, this result indicate that in PD, there is abnormal beta spiking and local field potential oscillation, which emerge and resonate across the network. But still, this abnormal oscillating synaptic input entrains spiking activity of STN and basal ganglia downstream neuron, but do not entrain the spiking activity of the striatal projection neuron. Indeed, the striatal projection neuron failed to express spiking oscillatory activity, and their activity was not synchronized with the striatal LFP oscillation. And this indicates that abnormal beta oscillation in PD propagate across the closed loop of the corticobasal ganglia network through the STN, but not through the striatum. And we suggest that this result might explain somehow why the STN is such an effective target for invasive treatment, such as deep brain stimulation of basal ganglia related disorder. And so now let's move to the second part and the theoretical aspect with Arthur. So if Arthur can
Great, thank you.
Control.
You have to stop the sharing.
You must stop the sharing.
All right. I will do it now.
And I share. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so I will continue with our theoretical work and our modeling, trying to understand the dynamics of the basal ganglia thalamocortical network conferred by its anatomical properties and physiological properties. And we will see how some of the dynamics that we see in the modeling may explain the data that Mark has just shown us. The idea here is to model the motor loop of the basal ganglia thalamocortical network, both in the normal state and in the pathological state, reflecting Parkinson's disease or Parkinsonism in general. And to do so, I will first explain how we understand in the model the generation of movement by the network, which is its normal functioning for the motor loop, how dopamine depletion affects the dynamics of the network, and in particular, how beta oscillations may emerge in this network in the severe dopamine depletion condition. Okay, so the model that we are working on is a continuous attractor model of the motor loop of the basal ganglia thalamocortical loop. Why continuous attractor model? Simply because it encodes the ability to perform continuous movement by the system with a continuous motor code, as opposed to most current model of the basal ganglia loop and its motor action. And also because the basal ganglia in this model shape cortical activity, and the tuning of cortical activity during the model is actually determined by attractor dynamics, as called in the system dynamics field. That is actually what allowed us to understand this system. Okay, so some of the simple principles behind the dynamics analysis that I will show here were already performed in a very simple version of this model in my PhD long time ago, but we have revised this model a lot to make a more realistic representation of the model. And in particular, we wanted to have a representation of movement generation that is more realistic, because we tend in the field of the basal ganglia to consider the motor output to be simply actions selected by the basal ganglia encoded in segregated populations, while we know today that the motor cortex encodes continuously an infinite number of possible movements. Okay, and more particularly in the context of reaching movement performed, for example, by primates. The work of Giorgio Poulos in the 80s has shown that there is a continuous motor code in the primary motor cortex, with each neuron in the primary motor cortex having a preferred motor direction, which is the direction that evokes a maximal change in firing rate for this neuron. And when the direction moves away from this preferred direction, the change in firing rate is smaller, and this leads to the so-called tuning curve of activity in the motor cortex. And we decided to encode this movement representation in the motor cortex population of the model. So the motor cortex is arranged on a ring where each neuron of the motor cortex is associated to a preferred direction, which is its angle on the ring. Okay, so the population can be arranged on a ring between associated to angles between minus pi and pi. And this motor cortex is then embedded in the basal ganglia thalamocortical network, where anatomical and physiological properties are driven from the experimental evidence that we have today. In particular, what is very important is that the connections between the various populations in the network are known to be topographically organized. Okay? Topographic organization means that the network is organized actually in parallel feedback loops, okay, at a relatively fine-grained level. And we implement this topographic organization as a pattern of connectivity between each population in the cortex. And this pattern of activity is locally strong. And then as the distance between the neuron and the preferred direction of the neuron increases, the probability of connection and the strength of connection decreases. Okay, so there is this topographic organization of the connectivity pattern in the network, with a footprint of the connection pattern that is much more divergent in the connection from the subthalamic nucleus to the external and internal part of the globus pallidus, as was revealed also experimentally in the last 20 years by anatomical and physiological study. And this divergence is very important because it places the SDN in a position to influence the whole network, not simply influence the activity locally, as we will see later. The model is, I forgot to mention, it's a mean field model where neurons are represented by their firing rate, which could be a local population or a single neuron. And this allows us to analyze the dynamics of the network. Okay. When analyzing the dynamics of the network through simulations, we can see that, as we had shown in previous versions of the model, the dynamics of the network is determined by the competition between the feedback loops that constitute the network, because these feedback loops have a huge influence on the dynamics of the network. There are positive feedback loops, for example, the direct pathway through the striatum, which inhibits the output nucleus of the basal ganglia and thus leads to a positive feedback loop because the outputs of the basal ganglia are inhibitory themselves. These positive feedback loops will tend to amplify cortical activity. Okay, this positive feedback loop will induce an amplification of the activity in the loops that it is in. Okay. On the opposite, negative feedback loops, such as the negative feedback loop going through the STN, exciting the output structure, which inhibits the thalamus, this negative feedback loop through the STN has, on the opposite, a damping role on the motor cortex. So it reduces the activity in the motor cortex, or more precisely, it reduces the gain of the motor cortex to its input. And interestingly, because it's a negative feedback loop with delay, and we know in physics, in dynamical systems, that any negative feedback loop with delay can induce oscillation, this pathway can induce oscillatory activity in the network. And so in general, the dynamics can be summarized in this relatively simple phase diagram where we look at the dynamics of the system as a function of two very important parameters. One, the corticostriatal synaptic gain, okay, on the x-axis here, and two, the cortico-STN, subthalamic nucleus, synaptic weight, okay, determining the balance between the weights of positive and negative feedback loops. And we have three dynamical regimes depending on the relative strength of this corticostriatal or cortico-STN pathway. If they are both balanced, we have what we call the linear regime, okay, and this is illustrated here by looking at the cortical activity starting from the resting activity where all neurons in the cortex are firing at relatively low rate, okay, and if we perturb this activity, the network stays in this relatively homogeneous resting activity. On the opposite, if we have a strong corticostriatal synaptic connection, as illustrated by the red circles here, we have what we call a symmetry breaking. Okay, the attractor dynamics of the network pushes the network into a state where the activity is not homogeneous, but actually shaped and tuned. Okay, so any small perturbation in this homogeneous resting activity leads to a symmetry breaking and a tuning of the activity of the network, which will be important for movement generation, as I will show you in the next slide. And finally, if the corticostriatal strength connection is relatively weak, but we have a sufficiently strong cortico-STN connection, because I said that negative feedback loop can induce oscillation, this dynamical regime can emerge where any perturbation in the system leads to synchronous oscillatory activity in all the network. Okay, so these are the three dynamical regimes that we can see in this model, and they depend on the relative strengths of the corticostriatal and cortico-STN connection. Okay, so for the normal state, we consider that the system is in this symmetry breaking regime. And what happens in this symmetry breaking regime is that if we submit the cortex to an input that without the basal ganglia would lead to a homogeneous activation of all its neurons, because of the network and its attractor dynamics the symmetry breaking mechanism, it induces a tuned activity in the cortical population, pointing to a direction that will be determined by any asymmetry in the system. And in our case, we just add a weak and transient input from a sensory cortex pointing to the direction of the movement that has to be executed, okay? But the shape of this tuned cortical activity is really determined by the pattern of connectivity in the network. I have no time to go in this here, but it's really shaped by the network. And as a consequence, all populations in the basal ganglia network actually display a tuning during movement. For example, in the GPI, neurons related to the direction of the movement will be strongly inhibited, while neurons away with a preferred direction away from the movement direction will be activated. Okay, so this induces a bimodal response in the GPI and in general tuning curves in all populations of the basal ganglia, as has been revealed experimentally by Turner and Anderson in the 90s. Okay, so the basal ganglia, because of this attractor dynamics in this symmetry breaking regime, can shape cortical activity, leading to a tuning pattern and tuning curve in the cortex that are determined by their interactions with the basal ganglia. So that's the normal state. Now, what happens with dopamine depletion? We summarize in a kind of rough way the effect of dopamine on the network in our model. We know that dopamine can act basically on any synapse or any neuron in the basal ganglia, but because of the massive dopamine innervation in the striatum, it's still believed today that the effect of dopamine depletion and the motor symptom and the dynamical change in the network due to dopamine depletion may be mostly due to the effect of dopamine in the striatum and the changes of striatal physiological properties due to dopamine depletion.
3 minutes.
And look, yeah, 3 minutes. Okay, I will accelerate. And so we summarize the effect of dopamine depletion by basically having a weakening of the corticostriatal gain when dopamine is depleted, and a decrease in the striatal threshold compensating this lack of input and letting the striatum being active, okay? But with a strong weakening of the inputs to the striatum, which means that the striatal neurons will be less responsive under dopamine depletion to their cortical input. This, of course, because as we have seen in the phase diagram, the dynamics depends on the corticostriatal connection weight, will change the dynamics of the network. We will move left in this phase diagram, and the system will lose the symmetry breaking properties, the tuning properties, and then eventually go to oscillatory mode. And that's what happens with 50% dopamine depletion. The system does not tune the cortical activity anymore, and there is kind of a low and flat activation in the cortex during voluntary movement or the tentative to execute a movement, while all neurons in the GPI are slightly excited, but there is no more shaping of movement-related activity by the basal ganglia. After severe dopamine depletion, there is oscillatory activity that develops in the whole network and that we see here in the cortex or in the GPI at rest or during movement execution. Okay? And if we look a little bit deeper in this oscillatory activity, that's really Parkinson-like beta activity, we can see that all populations in the network display this strong oscillation except the striatum here in cyan. And this can be readily and relatively simply explained because under dopaminergic depletion, the weakening of the corticostriatal connection, which has been reported experimentally, is virtually disconnecting the striatum from the basal ganglia thalamocortical network. The striatum still has an influence on its target, but it's not influenced by the network anymore. And because in our model, the mechanism of generation of the beta oscillation relies on a cortex STN GPI thalamus cortex loop, we have the striatum does not participate to the generator and does not receive input that are oscillatory, so it's not oscillatory anymore, explaining maybe why Mark doesn't see the oscillations in the spiking activity in the striatum. And importantly, the oscillation frequency is related to delays in the network and time scales of neuronal transmission in the network. and with delays along the loop through the STN that corresponds to realistic values. It's hard to know exactly how fast the information flows in this network, but it's likely that from the cortex back to the cortex through the STN loop, it takes between, let's say, 13 and 30 milliseconds. This gives oscillation frequencies between 10 and 15 hertz that are compatible with what is seen by Mark and others in primates and humans. Okay, so this mechanism is still a possible generation mechanism for the oscillation that we see in monkeys, and we would like, and I think that Mark's data that he presented is actually well aligned with this modeling hypothesis. Still,
Arthur, you need to conclude.
Okay, I will conclude. So we are trying to investigate other possible mechanisms, and we want to highlight the fact that maybe in rodents and monkeys, the mechanism could be different. But anyway, we can test predictions of these various models using the phase of spiking in the various populations during the beta oscillation, and with maybe chemogenetic inactivations of specific sites to point to the generation mechanism. Thank you very much.